Hey guys, good afternoon. Tom Stewart here, and I'm with Matt Ricketts filling in for Liz Trotter today. This is Smart Business Moves. Matt, how are you?
I'm good, Tom. Good to see you.
Same here. It's been a few weeks. What's been going on in your world?
You know, it's just trying to get back on top of things with business and kind of come up with a plan to grow through this. And mostly we're just treading water right now, trying to keep what we have. But that's we've seen some positive trends, but there's just so much uncertainty right now that it's hard to make concrete plans. We put a lot of stuff on paper for how we expect stuff to go this year, but lots beyond our control.
We've had some discussions here over the last, this has been going on for a while, but within Castle Keepers, we're making a bigger push to go to solos. And Matt, you've been helping us with this. Joe Walsh has, a few other people, and we're getting rid of keys. We're going all to credit cards. We're, starting to recruit for people that want to work solo. And we've been having discussions about, is COVID going to be gone in 6 months or not? And just before we went live, I guess it looks like more and more of the evidence is stacking up that we're going to need to have businesses that can practice COVID safe rules for a long time.
Yeah, I'd go ahead and order more masks. I think I think that we will be wearing masks in social settings for the rest of this year, at least. I don't think that that's going away. I'm seeing more and more evidence it's a good idea to wear a surgical mask with a cloth mask. I tend to kind of cowboy it and just either wear like a bandana or just one of these little things. But I think I'm going to probably up my mask game a little bit from here on out, because I understand that some of these variants are getting a little bit more contagious. And, I'm out visiting properties and, stopping in, visiting some of my property managers from time to time. And some of those settings are, probably more risky than others.
Yeah, I've been doing the KN95 here for a number of months. But yeah, I've seen studies that are saying if you double mask, you're getting a lot more protection.
Yeah, it's frustrating because like we all want this to be over, but that doesn't really necessarily take into account that the virus is a living organism that's going to change and adapt, and we don't really have a say in it. And the vaccine rollout couldn't happen fast enough, and I think it's happening incredibly fast. I think we're in incredible scientific times to look at this and say we just pushed out a vaccine in under a year, right? 10 months they got that thing out from the time that we started talking about this seriously. So hopefully they'll be able to keep on top of this. But we talked about this a little bit, Tom. This is going to be somewhat akin to like the seasonal flu or something along those lines, where we see this kind of year after year, and we're going to have to find ways to adapt and protect our most vulnerable populations first.
Yeah, and there's I guess some disturbing information coming out that's kind of pointing to these new variants are not only are they more contagious, they actually might be more deadly, and they certainly are seeming to be more resistant to the vaccines that are out there.
Yeah,
this is one thing I'll share that we were looking at earlier. This is a relatively short article, but it's good. It was talking about the new variant in Brazil and how everybody in Brazil is getting sick, and we're catching COVID again, basically. And
that's scary, because they talked about in that article is that in the city that they were, I don't remember the name of the city that they were talking about, that they assumed that almost 75% of the population had already had a COVID, what would you call it? Not exposure, but actual had a COVID case.
Yeah, 75% of everybody in the country's already had COVID. It happened already. Now everybody's getting sick again. And they're figuring the only way that can happen is that they're getting sick a second time.
Yeah, so that's definitely, because you would think at some point, with if there's some herd immunity, it would be harder and harder to spread COVID. I had kind of thought that was kind of what was going on here in the States, as we saw like it kind of speed, like, we saw that big spike where you'd think you'd kind of just keep going up and up and up. And then we've seen it started to come down, at least in St. Louis and Missouri, where we've had a lot of exposures, like where, outside of the direct St. Louis region, the rest of the state here, I'd say probably 40% of people have been exposed outside of the St. Louis region, have had not an exposure, but actually have had COVID outside of direct St. Louis region.
The numbers are projected to be higher than what's actually been, clinically diagnosed.
Yeah, I'd say it's 20% in St. Louis. Like we have, known cases. We have close to 22,000 in the city of St. Louis, which is a city of 300,000. And, if it's triple that number, I wouldn't be surprised. That's where I'm kind of coming up with some of this based on some projections that are out there. But in the more rural counties of Missouri, it's much higher. Anyway, we're starting to see like a pretty rapid drop off. And a lot of that we were attributing here locally to, hell, so many people are exposed. It's, there's that N number, it's harder for the vaccine to hook up with people that don't have some immunity. So, I've got employees whose whole families have been exposed, like, not just like, 4 of them, but like, I'm talking about like their extended family.
Mm-hmm.
They're in like, they live in some of the adjacent counties that, a little more rural, a little bit more lax with some of the stuff out there. And, everyone's had it.
At the moment, I think there's only 5 states of the country that have an N value greater than 1. So it's, it's at a very high number in terms of number of infections that are happening every day, but it's still kind of on a downtrend. Got a few people here today. Bridget's with us. Hey, good to see you. Donna's saying it. I presume that she went to solos in April. I think it's the way to go. Denise, glad to see you, Matt. Got a very special guest today. Somebody's having a birthday today, I believe. Hey, Leslie, happy birthday.
Yeah.
Do we want to? We're not going to sing. We won't do that. But I hope you're having an awesome birthday today.
Nice. Yeah, but back to the solo stuff. I mean, yeah, I think that's a very robust way to build your business to be more COVID proof in a lot of ways. Yeah, I mean, I can talk about a little bit how we kind of got to that. So we were experimenting with it. Pre-COVID. I probably had 3 or 4 technicians that we were set up as solos, and we were really loving the experiment. But we were just like, how do we get this to all the techs? Because there's going to be so much pushback from your employees to making such a big change, even if it's good for them, even if it's going to make them more money. So when COVID came, my wife Angela was in the office one day, and we had this 4-week plan on the board to start transitioning people to solos. And she's like, scrap that plan. They're all going to solos next week. She's like, you don't even know how many more weeks we're going to be open. I was like, she's like, everyone's a solo next week. And I was like, fine by me. Let's see how many of them quit. But, we did have some employees that gave a lot of pushback. But we're like, it's about your safety. We dialed it up that way. And really it happened pretty quickly. We made a lot of big changes rapidly. So we bought a bunch of lock boxes and delivered them to our customers. And that was a big piece of again, not needing to come to the office, right? You want to make your workforce as distributed as possible. We spoke with all the customers that like to leave us checks and cash. And we said, we can no longer take your checks or cash. We still get some. I mean, it still happens, and we deal with it. I'm talking to my staff now, my management team now, about how do we get these last 10 stragglers to kind of comply with this for safety purposes. And honestly, it's not good because our employees only come in for, once a week. And if they forget to give us the checks, then we might not see someone's check for 2 weeks. And if, for some people that doesn't matter. So other people, they're probably like, well, it probably screws up their reconciliation of like when they paid for something, what they're looking for to see. Like a credit card is so much cleaner. They have their service in the day, the charge hits their bank on that day. It's easy to determine for them where that money was for, right? So I think it's a better system.
We launched those emails today in Atlanta, and we're giving people 2 weeks. And our thinking is we'll probably do like a 2-week grace period, and we're kind of doing this based on how Joe Walsh kind of coached us to do it. And he just cut people off after 4 weeks. If they didn't have a credit card on file, they just wouldn't schedule them.
It's, honestly, if they want your service bad enough, they'll figure it out. I mean, I've got a couple of elderly clients, and I told my staff, I was like, they have credit cards. They're worried about giving out their credit card because they feel like it's less secure. The
other thing he was doing, though, he gave them an option of paying for 6 months in advance. And we offered that, and we started making some phone calls. And I don't know, out of less than 10 phone calls, one person's already taken us up on that, wants to stroke us a check for 6 months worth of service.
Yeah, I think that we've done that in the past. And I think if you offer, 3 to 5% off, I think some people will look at that and be like, I mean, if you're like a hardcore saver, even 3%, they see the value in that. They're like, yeah, so that's your credit card processing. I think 5%.
If the money is sitting in a checking account, that's 3% more than they're going to get there, right?
True. That's absolutely true. And if they were going to spend it anyway, they've been long-term customers. I mean, I see that as a win. I don't see anything, that's not a bad idea to encourage. And we'll probably look at that too, kind of go back to that. But yeah, you talk about the advantages of it. You guys have been talking about productivity on the show, and there's two kind of numbers that oftentimes get confused, right? Like productivity and efficiency. Have you ever talked about like the difference between the two and like where people kind of get confused?
We just started getting into that, so we're just scratching the surface. So run with it.
Yeah. So like efficiency is how much of their time they spend cleaning in the day. That's important. Like, so you want your teams to be efficient. You want them to be spending 80% of their time cleaning, but that doesn't tell you how much of their time compared to the bill rate that they're actually doing. That's a different number. So productivity is, and I assume, Tom, you're thinking of this the same way. Productivity is the time that they spend cleaning compared to the time that they have that they're billed for. So if it's an hour and 20-minute job that they're supposed to be doing, and they take, an hour and 25 minutes, then they were, 95% productive. Their productivity rate's 95%, which is, not optimal. You want it to be 100% or greater, really.
Well, the definitions that we use in our world and within Made Central, productivity is simply the allowed time divided by the actual time.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was going out without using the definitions that you have there. That's very clear, though.
Inefficiency is job time divided by clock time.
Yeah, there you go. So that's those are the two things that you'll see really. So the efficiency automatically goes up with going to solos. So that's the first thing. So don't confuse productivity and efficiency, but efficiency immediately goes up with solos because their drive time in the morning is cut off because you don't have to pay them to drive to their first property. That's just their commute to work now because that's from their home to their first property. So that's severely cut in half. They're only going to do, instead of having to go to 3, 4, 5 properties like you have with a team, right? They're only going to do 2 to 3 properties. So there's only going to be 2 transition periods during the day at the most, probably, if they do 3 properties. So again, productivity is going to go way up because you have as many as six transition periods with teams. So, drive to the first house and then every transition in between plus lunches and the drive back. That's all really hard to reach a productivity above 75%. Would you agree with that, Tom? That's one of the downfalls of teams.
Yeah, you're a lot less efficient, especially if your teams have to meet in the at an office in the morning and kind of get together and all of that thing, and then at the end of the day, come back at the office and download. There's a lot of wasted time, and you're not social distancing, and you're not really being competitive in a world that hourly wages are going to be going up. I mean, minimum wage of $15 an hour. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And what's that going to do to come to industries that have to pay more than minimum wage?
Yeah, and if you think about it, so if you can get your productivity to 10% higher than it was, maybe significantly more. I'd have to really look. But I see productivity as high as 90% with some of my solos.
Productivity, you mean efficiency?
I'm sorry, efficiency. I'm sorry. See, even I'm confusing the terms right now. So you get them. Yeah. So efficiency. So I see efficiency sometimes as high as 90% of solos. Some of my solos like to come to the office every day because they want to switch out their cloths every day. They don't want to sit. They don't want to have dirty ones in their cloths in their car for 2 or 3 days. That definitely hurts. You need to encourage a structure that allows them only to come to the office 1, maybe 2 times a week to really optimize that efficiency. That's going to be where you can really get it. The less time that they have to even come to the office, that ultimately really improves things. So, but if they only have to come 1 time a day, that's better than twice a day. So
Yeah.
that's.
And there's a lot of merits to this being, the social distancing part. You only have one person in the car, and it's their own car. You don't have team meetings, and my model, your business model, it was all built on company cars, brick and mortar, and I think COVID world, I think that we really need to start taking a hard look at that.
I had 16 cars when COVID started. I have 6 cars today. I mean, I sold cars during this. And at some point, cars started to sell really well. At first, I sold a couple at a loss when this first started because I thought the world was going to end. I was like, unloading some cars. But by the time COVID was kind of coming to a close, I was selling cars at well above what I would have gotten at auction a year ago. Selling them to private parties and people like that were just trying to flip them locally. And I didn't, I don't want to clean them up and recondition them if I'm selling them. So, it was a good time to sell cars towards the end of this.
We can swing back around to solos and what that means for efficiency and
Sure.
all the other safety reasons, if we have time, but I want to make sure that we have plenty of time to talk about PPP2 and employee retention tax credit. And we've been talking about idle loans a little bit in terms of how that still might have, some play. You want to share, Matt, a little bit about what you've been up to for the last couple of weeks in the in this whole realm?
Yeah. So I finished my application for PPP2 last Tuesday, the first day that it was available to non-minority owned businesses or women owned businesses. So some of you might have had a window a little earlier than me. If you're some women owned businesses could apply a little earlier. My bank is a local regional bank. They weren't taking any applications till Tuesday. I filled out my application Tuesday. I was approved by last Friday, and I was funded money in my bank account by, I believe, Tuesday. It could have been Monday. But the process was much faster than the first time.
No longer than a week from application to money in hand.
Pretty much. Yeah, it was very fast. Same amount of money as last time based on all the same guidelines. And very straightforward. So if you had the definition of revenue to go after PPP2, the 25% definition of revenue in any quarter in 2020 versus 2019, I think it's it would be crazy not to do it at this point because you can just make such big reinvestments in your employees. We immediately raised our base pay to 14. I'm really considering already going all the way up to 15, but I'm going to hold off and just see how well we do recruiting before I immediately jump there. But it definitely feels good to have that big cushion to make those decisions because we're still generating revenue. We're just generating less revenue than we did in 2019 and 2018. So, we're still at about little under 80, we're still a little under 80% of what we were. So off 20% still.
But because you've changed your business model and you're doing solos, your cost of good, we've been talking about this a lot, guys. We've been talking about this a lot. The magic of making changes in your business to get this loaded direct payroll to revenue down. And by making the change to solos, you've been able to do that. So your top line is down by, you said 20%?
Yeah, and I'm still able to pay myself very similar to what I was paying before and still make a profit. On paper, I actually probably paid myself a little bit more, but we took a loss in the second quarter of like $63,000 during COVID. So maybe carried a little bit forward past that in the third quarter. So due to all the changes we made, big purchases we made as far as things like that. But overall, you exclude out some of that stuff. We are a much leaner, much more efficient, much more productive operation and we're making more money per full-time equivalent. I actually have kind of done the math, and to do the same amount of revenue that we did before with price increases, to replace 200 clients, I only need to add 151 clients because we've raised our prices through this. So, we've raised our prices significantly to the point where, and we're still getting customers and putting them on, but we only need to add 151 to replace 200, the 200 that we lost. So 200 from our total of a little over 700, we're down to about 500 customers now. And we really only need about 36 or 37 technicians to service the company, the $2 million versus what was about 45 technicians prior to COVID. So you just get more out of your employees, per day. You can get more revenue out of them.
Your loaded direct payroll to revenue is lower now than when it was pre-COVID.
Yeah, it is. But there's also other things that are down. I mean, just the vehicle costs, right? Because that's rolled into the way I pay.
Sure.
So getting rid of 10 vehicles is roughly $5,000 a month or so. So that's significant amount of overhead cut. We've moved to making our own chemicals. That saves us roughly roughly 6,000 or 7,000. There's just a lot of little things. I did not replace one of my managers when they quit, so that that's roughly $4,000 or $5,000 a month. That's also saved.
From a profitability standpoint, you're pretty much. I mean, it sounds like you're no worse off than you were pre-COVID.
No, I'm very secure that we'll be able to. If we were to stay this size company and not grow another client, I would feel comfortable with the income that I'm making, and that that I can do all the things that I was expecting to do. I'm not gonna. I have a friend that owns. I've told this story before, but he owns some stuff in the live entertainment business. He does like sound and lighting and stuff like that for big shows like Celine Dion as an example. He did a big traveling show with her, and then also like Grateful Dead. Like just spans the horizon of like who he does. They were doing who's the artist that's like kind of older country but like smokes weed. I'm trying to think of what his name is.
Willie Nelson.
Yeah, Willie Nelson. They were doing Willie Nelson's last tour up until last year. He does all kinds of stuff, right? But like big tours. Well, I mean, he's at this point where like he got like one of those Main Street loans, like $10 million Main Street loans. He's like, all that money means is that I don't go out of business, but I'm going to probably work till I die now. Like, so, I mean, there's some people way worse off than us. On paper, he was a very rich guy before COVID, and now he's a very indebted guy after COVID, due to this.
Yeah, I imagine he's got tons of equipment that is financed in some form or fashion, and he's still on the hook paying for all that stuff, even though it's not making any money for him.
Pretty much. That's pretty much the deal. There's a
lot of capital investment in that game.
Yeah, I mean, it's good. It's good to be able to finance that equipment too. Like, so it's always good. Anyway, that's a whole nother thing. But yeah, they buy a lot of stuff cash, but then oftentimes they buy it cash so they can get a good deal on it, and then they'll refinance it later. So you're right. It's definitely a very highly leveraged business. So yeah, we're not.
He's got a similar business here in Charleston, and the bad news part of it is typically in an election year, especially a presidential election year, they make a ton of money doing that type of work, and
right,
that was all kind of buffered down. It's been tough all the way around.
Yeah, they actually he did. This guy did. There was a big event at the Arch Grounds here in St. Louis when during one of Obama's terms. I can't remember, but there was close to 250,000 people, and they did the sound and light there. And everyone said that if you were there, you could hear the speakers on stage wherever you were, like whether you like Obama or not. I'm just saying, like they did the sound there, and the sound was good. So like it was very That's you're right. That's big.
And to do that cost a ton of money. And
yeah.
And there's so much cash tied up in the equipment. If you don't use it, I don't know, man. It's tough.
So that's where our businesses have really been structured perfectly for this PPP. I mean, no other business I know of is as labor intensive with as little other I just did my PPP loan forgiveness. I did the calculations just because I'm getting ready to look at these ERTC tax credits for 2020 as well. And anyway, so doing the calculations, I ended up just using only payroll, because even if I saved a week, right? Like I took off a week of payroll, because my weekly payroll is like close to 20 grand or higher, like 23 grand or something like that. I couldn't replace that 1 week with enough other expenses to even get to full forgiveness.
So what you're talking about, I mean, there's so many different moving parts of this. What you're talking about right now is the forgiveness portion for your first PPP loan.
Right. And they didn't have all the new things on the form, on the new form from the SBA. So maybe that'll get updated, and they'll have like, PPE costs and things like that. But just using the original stuff, the original things that were included, like, mortgage interest or rent or utilities, right? Those are the three things that were really on there. I couldn't come up with anywhere near enough. So I just used payroll, because then I didn't have to document anything else. And I still got my forgiveness window down to 13 weeks.
So let's talk about that a little bit. I think, most of the people that are part of Smart Business Moves have kind of got their arms wrapped around the application for the PPP2, loan. And, that's probably already in the works for most of us, or at least there's few questions there. A number of people I know have already applied for forgiveness for their first loan, their first PPP loan. Talk a little bit about what this employee retention tax credit is and why that matters with the forgiveness of your first loan.
Yeah, let me share my screen for a second. I'm going to just share.
Sure.
Let's see, application window.
There should be something at the bottom that would say.
Sure. Yep, I'm just going to go. Oh shoot, I need to share.
Do you have another monitor? If you don't, it's no big deal. I can share it, but as soon as I do that, you're going to need to take whatever you want to share and just make it full screen, and you won't be able to see me.
Yeah, I need to see. So here, let me know when you see this.
Yeah, here you go.
Okay, so let me see.
You're up.
Okay.
You can see your spreadsheet.
Okay, so this spreadsheet is based on all the employees that I had in 2020. And basically what I did was I ran all their payroll from 7/20 till the end of the year. And the reason I used 7/20 was because that's the first week that I'm no longer using PPP.
Hey, dude. Hi, Column D. We're live streaming.
Well, there's no socials or anything on here, but so
yeah.
But anyway, so the point being, I looked at all their wages and came up with this number from July 20th to the end of the year. And the reason this is important is you can take these ERTC tax credits if you were shut down by a government order or you had a 50% reduction in revenue for any quarter, and then you can continue to take them until you're back to above 80% of your pre-COVID revenue for 2019. This is awfully complicated. I'm actually paying a company to help me sort all this out. They're going to take 10% off. They're going to take 10% off the top. But here's the deal. I ended up with gross wages I came up with gross wages that would be for this period for about, well, I didn't even add this up yet, but gross wages are this.
It's a sum button. We want to see, is it going to be a big number?
Yeah, formula, sum, auto sum.
You have to drag it up.
I'll just do the E2, enter. So 551,000. And what I did was I ran a formula on this one that said 50% of wages or $5,000 cap, and then that came up with $182,897 roughly. So what's going on here is that these ERTC tax credits could net me another $182,000 in government subsidies to help me rebuild my business and help me make some big investments. But there's no restrictions on this money. That's the thing. So once you have this money, it's
you can buy a boat with it if you want to.
It's 100% restriction free. It is taxable, so you're going to pay You're going to pay taxes, the marginal tax rate on this $182,000 as capital gains. But I don't know. I guess it could be direct income if you're just a sole proprietor. I don't know exactly how it's going to be taxed, but I'm assuming it's going to be capital gains because of my tax structure. So you'll have to talk to your own tax advisor. But this is what I came up with today: is that this.
And that's on top of, this is for 2020, and this is on top of the PPP money that you got in 2020, which are going to be forgiven.
Yes. So I'm going to go back off the share, but this is an important thing for you to wrap your head around if you're trying to figure out how to maximize all the different programs that are available to you to get your business back on its best possible footing, moving into the later stages of 2021. And that's why I feel comfortable making some making some bonuses to my employees that have stayed through all this, and to raising our base wages and things like that. I just feel like that's what they want us to do with this capital. And at the end of the day, I'm going to probably end up having more money to feel safe going into 2022 and make some big investments into growing into 2022.
So those employee retention tax credits for 2020 is kind of a new thing. Before
Right.
the last budget, and not the budget, but the last relief bill that passed at the end of December, you couldn't do PPP and the ERTC both, but that legislation said you could, but you can't dip.
Yeah, and now it said you can't do it at the same time. Now, some people that have used their forgiveness already used the 24-week. I had an interpretation from a company today that said, well, they're just going to look at the weeks that it took you to reach full forgiveness. And even if you use 24 weeks, don't worry about that, and just use what you projected, because you were no longer using capital. You were no longer using PPP after that point. That was just strictly for forgiveness purposes. It wasn't designed to hold you back from using this program now. So I'm not a lawyer. I'm not the IRS. I don't know that
You didn't even sleep at a Holiday Inn last night.
Yeah, I don't know that interpretation is correct, but I don't think I would count out these credits, even if you did forgiveness already and maximized.
The point is, if you qualify for these tax credits, it would be worth taking an extremely hard look at, because it could be a lot of money. And there's primarily two criteria for 2020 that you have to meet one or the other. Is that correct, Matt?
Yeah. So you want to go over them? You know them pretty well at this point.
Well, you have to have a 50% loss in revenue quarter over quarter, 20 compared to 19.
Right.
For most of us, that would be quarter two if we shut down for any period of time. So if you did $100,000 in Q2 of 2019 and you did less than 50,000 in Q2 of 2020, then you would qualify, no questions asked.
But then the other piece that's a little bit more ambiguous is if you were subject to a government order that required you to shut down or made business, untenable or something. The language is ambiguous. I'd have to read it, but the language is a little ambiguous. And I think that a lot of companies actually are going to qualify for this for some period of time. Now, again, this goes away once you get back to 80% of your pre-COVID levels. So if you're in a more rural part of the country that just never really took a hit from COVID, or again, I live in a big city where not a big city, but more urban, more they took the stance of being more cautious on COVID. We did shutdowns early and they were mandated. That certainly hurt us in the time, but looking back, that's what these credits are for, those businesses that were forced to shut down and do that. So I would take a hard look at and see if you qualify based on government orders too. And if there was an order in your area, even if it was ambiguous, and unless you made the stance that you were an essential business and wouldn't shut down no matter what, then that's probably, that's probably tougher to justify. But if you shut down for a single day while you were trying to figure out the ambiguity of these orders, I think you could make the argument that you might qualify. And that's why I hired a company to do these for me, because they're going to take 10% off the top of that number that you saw. So I'm not going to get to keep all of that, but the peace of mind to me to know that it's all done properly, that it's all basically, they're taking the legal responsibility that all the hoops are jumped through, that's worth that 10% to me. It's just, a little sleep better at night versus trying to make all these guesses. They're going to do their best to make those assumptions.
Yeah, it's kind of tough to say with that. Did the state or local government require you to shut down? That is very gray. I guess the other question is, if you apply, and if your interpretation is different than the interpretation of as long as you're being transparent in terms of how you're rationalizing, your qualification for it. And again, I'm not an attorney or, a CPA, but I don't think there's a tremendous risk, because you're not doing anything fraudulent. You're following the rules that you did the best you can. That
put it into a low yield bond. If you're all that worried about it, get 2.5% and, pay the taxes on it, because they're going to get that money in anyway. And if you have to pay the rest back because of a misinterpretation, you didn't do anything wrong if you can give the money back. Now, if you go out and buy a boat with it and, you can't pay it back. So I intend to hold this money as well for a long period of time as a cushion, and B, just in case the government ever decides that they were a little too generous and want their money back, basically.
Put it in Bitcoin and GameStop stock.
Right. Those are sure things.
But I did talk to, and again, this is just my discussion with my CPA, which might not apply to anyone else here. Talk to your own, tax people. But, the discussion went in the path of, if we apply for PPP2 and somewhere along the way, there's some determination that we didn't qualify because, the math didn't come out right. It's like, well, worst case, it's going to be treated, you're not going to get forgiveness, and it's going to be treated as a loan you got to pay back in 5 years.
Right. At 1%. I mean, again, like if you don't go crazy and use the money on things that are irrational, and that's the thing, this is smart business moves. It's not irrational business moves. Like, take this money and go buy your dream house or anything like that. That's not what this money is for. It's not to make us rich. It's to make our businesses whole and to make us, make some smart investments in our people. But, at the end of the day, part of being a smart business owner is retaining profits and keeping them in your business as much as you can too. So don't go crazy with this money if you don't have to keep your business afloat. Like, make some investments, but.
Because let's go back to where we were at the beginning of this discussion, that there's a lot of data that's been rolling out here the last few weeks, that all these variants of COVID and what's happening, that it's just not going to be as easy as everybody's going to get a vaccine between now and the end of summer, and this thing's going to be over with. It appears more and more every day that we're going to have to manage COVID for a longer, maybe a much longer period of time. So, these monies you might be saying, hey, I don't need the money. Well, I don't think that we know enough to know if you're going to need it or not, because we don't know where we're going to be a year from now.
And we don't know if they're going to keep doing bailout bill after bailout bill. I mean, eventually they're going to lose the appetite for doing it. I mean, it's not going to be politically, the thing of the moment. Like this is life, guys, get on with it. So, as it stands now, yeah, there are these opportunities that are going to help us, but yeah, Tom's right. They could roll up and go away in the future and not present themselves again. This is pretty rare. I usually, when they do these kind of bailouts and things like that, this is not for us. This is for the airlines. This is for big manufacturing and banks. I'm not that old, but I don't remember anybody ever bailing out small businesses before. So
no. This
You're
is
on your own, entrepreneurs.
this is an unprecedented event,
Yeah,
and you know, you're gonna, I think that we're going to need to make changes in our business to be more resilient in a world that looks more like what it does today than what it looked like a year ago for a longer time than what we thought. I hope I'm wrong, but it's better to prepare for that. That every day it's looking more like that might be the case. So be
Yeah,
ready for that.
every day that I don't buy a restaurant during COVID is a good day. Me and Tom have joked. I've almost invested in 2 restaurants during COVID, and every day that I don't do it, it's a good day as this keeps dragging on. I'm like thinking to myself, "Whew, dodged a bullet on that first one."
Yeah, and I've had some opinions on that, but there's a lot of other ways to inflict pain on yourself rather than to do that.
Absolutely. So yeah, I think so. So we've talked about the solo model and some benefits of that. You may still need some teams to operate because you're going to need trainers and QAs and things like that to do that. So you're still going to have, even though I have like 20 solos now, I still have 9 or 10 team members, that are, people that are new hires, they're getting trained, and or QAs and trainers. Leslie or anyone else that's in this model, is that typical for you, or do you have only solos? How do you teach people that stuff? How do you train them?
She's been doing it for 20 years.
Yeah.
Linda had a good point here. I don't want to go miss that. If they want to pay for 6 months, she gives them a free cleaning.
If that was a weekly cleaning, I would love that. I don't know, like biweekly maybe, but monthly that starts to get pretty
I would have to figure out what service frequency they'd have to be on where that would make sense. But it's a neat idea.
It'd be about a 5% discount if you were talking about weekly. It's only about, becomes like a pretty significant discount, or pretty significant discount on biweekly even. But I think so. It makes sense.
Let's also talk about things we need for taxes this year.
Well, you're going to need to have all your loan numbers together, and from, if you have an idle loan, you're going to need to get. I mean, that's a big conversation. There's a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot out there. I mean, you're going to be paying taxes off of your the net profit of your business the way you have every year. That doesn't really change very much in terms of. It could have been a lot worse, because there was a time before this last bill passed that they thought that we weren't going to be able to deduct the expenses that we used the PPP monies to pay for, but now we can. So, that was a big blessing. We're into January now, so I guess the best time to have had that discussion would have been a couple of months ago. There could be possibly some things we could have done to.
Yeah, I don't think there was anything really that we knew for sure though until just recently. Like, I was counting on that we were going to have a pretty big tax bill because of the PPP. So I went out and bought a vehicle cash right before the end of the year that I was planning on just depreciating. I needed a new vehicle anyway, so just something a little bit larger that qualified for 100% depreciation. It's kind of silly though. You spend money to save money on taxes, but it's something you needed anyway. So might as well take advantage of that. Those sort of things you kind of do. Yeah, Tom was saying you probably typically kind of do a lot of your tax planning into the third quarter. Well, I don't think I'm going to have that tax bill. In fact, I think I'm going to be able to carry a loss now, and actually, that depreciation is probably less valuable to me now, and I might have to do a 5-year depreciation schedule on this vehicle, and it's a little bit less valuable. So
this is Bridget says, yeah. I wonder what question we were yapping to.
Probably about whether she only has solos.
Only solos. Yeah, okay. Only solos, unless it's a job over 7 hours, a deep clean, elevated vacation rental. Aren't they all elevated? I guess
elaborate.
Country. Oh, elaborate. Never mind. I'm illiterate. I got you. A big one. Example, dollar for dollar tax credit for employees paid out. Oh. Dollar
I
for
don't think it's quite a dollar for dollar, and it oftentimes is done directly through your payroll company. I mean, at least for me.
well, for the you get 2 weeks of COVID pay.
Yeah.
That is, I guess you would argue dollar for dollar. It's not any direct benefit to you. It's just kind of a pass through where you're paying your employees
Yeah.
if they've got a COVID issue.
Yeah. Now, is it 100% or is it some fraction of it? It never feels like 100% when I put it on there. It never quite looks like it.
It's my understanding it's 100%. I mean, I haven't really looked at the numbers, but
I thought it was like 66%, but I could be wrong. I think that might just be the one that's 2/3 for the family leave. That one is confusing to me, so I don't know.
if somebody's missing work because they have COVID or have to be out because they've been direct contact, whatever. So it looks like Bridget does a trainer in solos.
So Robin had a question about a good resource to read about the ERTC. I would go and search. Man, I wish I could tell you that. I'll try and find the link later. There was a link that the Chamber of Commerce did that was a really good resource on the ERTC. Let me Google that really quick.
I'm on it.
Oh, you're looking for it? Yeah, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce had a really good link to the new ERTC rules. I would go to companies that process these things, like Synergy Partners. It's spelled SYNGERI, Synergy Partners. They are a company that processes these things. They've got a lot of resources on their website about the programs, and I mean, they're giving out as much information as they can because they just know that it's so complicated that you may end up still hiring them anyway. So it's like, it's kind of the model of share as much as you can because that it's such a complex topic that a lot of people don't. Hey, we had a lot of people using that, so I think that might be where I'm getting that 66% number.
I thought I had it, but I might not.
Yeah.
I know.
You might be on the links you thought you might have had it in the links on Smart Business Moves.
Yeah, I know.
We'll look for it. Yeah, I think, as far as tax planning goes, I think a lot of that's already out the window. Now you're just going to deal with what you have to find out, like how does PPP affect taxes? Well, not as much as we thought originally. And if you do these ERTC tax credits, how does that affect your taxes? Well, you're going to get taxed on this money, but there's not all the restrictions that the PPP has. So
this is the article from Chamber of Commerce. This is an awesome article that you can't see. Let me see if I can.
But originally, none of us were given the ERTC too much. Originally, that was what we were all going to kind of bank on, right? Like when we were all kind of deciding to shut down, I think this bill was written in 9 days. This is the first thing that came out in February.
Robin, start with this article. This is the place you want to start. And
this was the most logical thing that happened at first. Like, oh, we'll do these tax credits. We'll kind of bail all these businesses out. It was originally for businesses under 100 employees like us. And, it was probably the most logical thing that kind of came out at the beginning of this thing and kind of gave me some hope that we were all going to be fine. And PPP obviously came out after that.
There's one more dimension of this ERTC, this employee retention tax credit that I don't know if we touched upon. We talked about the requirements or the criteria to qualify for 2020. But you can also get these for 2021, starting the quarter that we currently are in.
Right.
So, I'm a little fuzzy in terms. Well, the rule is it a 25% diminution?
20%.
Just you're right. 20% diminution of income, first quarter 21 compared to first quarter 19.
Yeah, you can use a base period of 20 or 19, either one.
Or you can use Q4 20 compared to Q4 19 as well. I believe they'll let you do that as an option, but it's only a 20% drop. The interesting part about this is if you can use Q1 of 21 against Q1 19, you got 2 months of runway here. And if you're going to be 18% down, you might want to back off your marketing a little bit. I mean, I'm not, maybe I don't mean to be, I shouldn't, let me take that back. I'm just talking about math here that one could do some arithmetic and come to the conclusion if they gave up a few points of revenue, they could make that back up many times over by getting these tax credits for Q1 20.
And just remember though, if you take PPP, you only have the weeks that you are not using PPP to qualify for ERTC tax credits. So it's $7,000 per quarter per employee. I mean, this is a very rich program. In fact, it might have been made more sense for me to do this instead of doing PPP at all. The reason I just went ahead and did PPP2 was because A, it was the guaranteed money, B, it was the tax-free money, and C, it was the money that already had a path to forgiveness already laid out with no really roadblocks. But you could do the math and see that this potentially could be a very, very rich program for some employers. Now, I don't think our wages are enough to tax. You'd have to be paying people, $10,000 a quarter to really max that out. But this could be a very, very, very beneficial program to certain businesses, depending on how they pay. So it's got some potential to be very lucrative. So again, if you can shorten your forgiveness window in 2021, if you get the PPP again, you might potentially have 14. If you could spend all the money in 8 weeks, you'd have 16 weeks or something like that. There's 26 weeks. I'm sorry, 20. God, my math is terrible right now. 26 weeks to spend 28 weeks. 28 weeks of 18 weeks. I'm sorry, 18 weeks potentially.
You haven't applied for PPP2 yet, or you don't have them yet. Even if you've applied, but you don't have them yet, the payroll from January 1st up to where you get the money is fair game, right?
Right. So you have all the weeks that you have here. You have all the weeks that you don't spend through it. So you potentially have as many as 18 weeks to as few as if you used 24 weeks to as few as 2 weeks, basically, if you used a 24-week window for forgiveness. So most of us can probably spend the money in 12 weeks, realistically, based on 2.5 months payroll. So if your forgiveness period is 24 weeks, then 12 weeks, then you have 14 weeks to capture these tax credits. It can still be a substantial amount of money. It could still be as much as, again, $7,000 a quarter. And again, it's per quarter. So you could stagger it a little bit in first quarter and a little bit in second quarter. If you were really smart, you might even go 3 more weeks of this quarter before you get your PPP money. If I would have been really smart, that would have been the play to have 6 weeks of both quarters, because you can do it. It's per quarter now. It's so there's quite a bit of money there.
You see Leslie's question? You get your PPP money shortly after you apply for it. Matt got his within a week, and I guess you used the same criteria as you did, and the same payroll numbers, basically same data that you did to get your first PPP loan.
But your PPP money doesn't count as revenue. So she's saying like, oh, I got my PPP money in second quarter. I'm off 20%. Well, then this money came in. That money should be excluded.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think what you need to do in your QuickBooks, if you haven't done this, Leslie, is you need to go back and edit when that PPP money came in and change it to a long-term liability. That way it doesn't show up in your profit and loss column on your profit and loss report. Because it's not income, it's a long-term liability. So it's just, I think you might have it, I may be misinterpreting your question, but I think you might have it marked wrong in your QuickBooks. What do you think, Tom? Does that sound like she can answer if I'm kind of on the right track there?
Yeah, I think that's where you're saying, because you did receive it in that quarter, but they called it a loan, I mean, it wasn't income. It wasn't money that you made from cleaning homes. So that should go on your balance sheet.
Okay, yeah. So Leslie, you just need to go back and you need to go to that transaction when it came in QuickBooks, or have your bookkeeper, or if you do your own books, then you need to go back and hit edit. And there should be the ability to change it to a long-term liability and, edit it, change it to a long-term liability, and then also maybe, notate it that it's your PPP loan one. And it should be very easy to correct that so it doesn't show as income on your profit and loss.
So when you put your P&L up for Q2 20, it'll look a lot more lower on the income side.
Yeah. And that's the alternate pay period is, basically if you run 2-week pay periods, the alternate pay period is just what they're saying is like, instead of saying your loan disbursement date, you can actually make your period start on your first pay period, which I didn't do because I pay weekly and it made so little difference. But yes, Denise, I think that's what you're talking about. So like the 2 weeks prior, so beginning pay period, like itself, like the 2 weeks prior to disbursement. Not quite sure. Does that mean the start day of the payday or the beginning of the pay period? The payday, the first time you paid any money, not the pay period itself, but the actual day. So when you want to switch the alternate pay period or the alternate period for doing your forgiveness, you want to make it that first payday, the first time that they got paid. If you pay every 2 weeks, so if it's like, for me, my first payday was probably April 27th. So I could have made my gone to an alternate pay period of April 27th for PPP forgiveness, but I just went ahead and just used April 20th because it didn't change enough for me to make it really a big difference to use either one. But if you do every 2 weeks payroll, it probably does. And that's what they mean by alternate pay period. You are correct. Alternate payroll covered period. Yes. Yeah, I think that I found that I've been educating my banker and my accountant a little bit on this stuff as we go through, Leslie. You're not alone. I think a lot of accountants get into accounting, because it tends to stay mostly the same. They get some rule changes every year, but the software kind of solves it for them. I don't think this is just Tom uses the word unprecedented. There's just so much information being thrown at them. I don't even feel like they're the best resources a lot of time unless that they're really actively specialized in small business accounting, And
they don't like talking about stuff that the rules aren't clearly defined, and all of this is just not. It hasn't been tested. It's just it's too soft, and it's like we don't know, and they don't. Nobody knows. Everybody's just kind of speculating on really how a lot of this is gonna play out.
I'll tell you a funny story, and then I think probably Tom likes to get these things to end on time. But so when this was going on, I called my accountant and asked him about all this, and he had no clue. And I was like, "Dude, you can apply for PPP." He's like, "I'm not going to have any loss money." I'm like, "Dude, there's so much uncertainty in the market. How could you not take the money?" So he went ahead and applied for PPP. I talked him into it, and I was like, "You need to really read up on this stuff because other people are going to be asking you these questions." And he went ahead and looked into it. And he's like, "Oh, yeah, I do qualify." He has like 16 guys working for him, and there was, he wasn't getting paid on time because everyone was pushing their taxes back and everything else. So I'm like, there's totally a lot of uncertainty in your industry. Even though you're going to eventually get paid, you don't know when you're going to get paid, right? I'm not paying you right now. I even joked with him. Like,
and yet, he doesn't even have 100% certainty that everybody's going to pay him. Some people might not be around to pay him.
Exactly. I mean, I owed him $2,000 and I told him straight up, I was like, I'm not paying you until I find out what's going on in this world. I'm like, every dollar I have in my bank account is money I'm keeping right now. So, I'll pay you, but just not today. So, there's a lot for them to handle there. And again, CPAs and lawyers like to deal in like concrete things, and they tend not to like, all this speculation, and they want to have solid answers. And, this is pretty squishy stuff we're all talking about here.
Matt, we are at the top of the hour. Thank you for joining us today. This was fun. We haven't done this in a few weeks.
Cool.
This is useful information, and hope everybody puts it to good use. rely on your professionals though. Lean on your CPA on this. And Leslie's making a point that for what she pays, her CPA should brush up. And yeah, we'll tell them that. Tell them that you've got friends and fellow cleaning business owners that know more than they do. Make them go into it. We will be back Monday with Smart Business Moves at 5:00 Eastern. Leslie, I hope you continue to have an awesome birthday. Until then, we'll see you Monday. Take care.